And good day. We are coming on the air with breaking news right now and another major escalation in the Middle East. Air raid sirens sounding in Israel as the Iron Dome appears to intercept new strikes from Iran. Those strikes are in retaliation to Israel's massive attack on Iran overnight. When Israel targeted top Iranian military leaders and nuclear scientists, dozens of people were killed and hundreds more were injured from that attack just in the capital city of Tehran. And now this retaliation is raising tensions in the Middle East. We've just gotten some new video that's come into the newsroom here. You can see some of the Iron Dome over Tel Aviv in action here. We understand these are some of those missiles being fired from Iran and intercepted in Tel Aviv. But we also have other video from tonight that shows something, whether they be drones or missiles, some type of something falling from the sky and exploding over Israel and landing clouds of black smoke in parts of Tel Aviv tonight as well. If we can roll that video at some point that we've gotten into the newsroom as well, you see it right here. These are the kind of images that they don't want to see in Tel Aviv, obviously. Possibly, again, drones or missiles, something getting by that Iron Dome and causing those fires and that smoke. Keir Simmons is in the region for us. He's been covering everything that's happened since Israel launched that preemptive attack, first on Tehran and Iran last night. Keir, what do you know about what's happening right now?
Well, Tom, we've heard the sirens across Tel Aviv. You can see the picture for yourself, that smoke rising above that Israeli city. And there are fears in Tel Aviv, looking at these images from people on the ground, that there may be some missiles that have struck somewhere in Israel. In the past, when Iran has launched strikes like this, its missiles have landed, but not landed anywhere to do any substantial damage. I will tell you, Tom, that I'm told by an Israeli military official that dozens of Iranian ballistic missiles, and this was that person talking with a text message a short time ago, that dozens of Iranian ballistic missiles are en route to Israel, and that the people of Israel have been instructed to remain in bomb shelters until a further notice. We saw one dramatic moment, Tom, when a briefing by the Israel Defense Forces was cut short. The briefer was talking about the Israeli strike on Iran and then paused, and then you heard the alarm, and then the feed simply cut. And that was the first indication we had that there was the threat of incoming Iranian ballistics on central Israel. And that is what we're seeing now, that threat. The question, of course, now tonight here is, has any of those Iranian munitions struck, or have they all been intercepted by Israel's very capable Iron Dome system?
It is 9:24 right now in Israel. The Iron Dome, which I've seen up close here, I know you have as well, essentially works on a radar system. It sees these incoming missiles, these incoming drones, and then essentially rocket launchers that are in hidden parts throughout Israel shoot off, and it intercepts those missiles or drones. The problem is it can be overwhelmed. That's possibly what happened here tonight. As you mentioned, dozens of ballistic missiles. The system can get overwhelmed at time. It has an incredible rate of efficiency, but again, at times bombs and missiles and drones can get through it. And Keir, I don't know if you have returned, if you can see these images. It looks like that smoke is pouring out from downtown Tel Aviv, where people live, where people work. Again, it's 9:24 p.m., but you can see the lights on in those buildings there right now. The sirens we know throughout Tel Aviv have been going off, alerting people to get to bomb shelters. And this, of course, Keir, follows what happened last night, that surprise attack on Iran. People had been talking about it, but Israel going ahead, the U.S. saying they had nothing to do with that attack. The president today saying American weapons were used, but this was all Israel. And Israel saying they did not want to wait. They felt that Iran was a threat. They targeted the nuclear facilities, but also the chain of command of Iran. What do we know about those attacks, Keir, and the people that were killed on the Iranian side?
Well, just as we've seen that, we're seeing that smoke now in real time in Tel Aviv, Tom. We've seen smoke rising above key facilities in Iran through the day, not least the Natanz nuclear facility, where we saw thick black smoke in the early hours of this morning. But Israel saying that it didn't simply target Iran's nuclear capability, but also took aim at its military leadership, saying that it had killed a number of key military leaders in Iran. For example, the Revolutionary Guard chief Hussein Salami, other commanders too. And we've been starting to get some stunning details of what appears to have have been an intelligence-led operation, much, Tom, like that pager bomb operation against Hezbollah that captivated the world. Honestly, the Israeli officials saying that they became aware of a meeting of Iranian military commanders in a bunker, and that was an opportunity to strike them. So the timing of all this may well have been intelligence-led as well, Israel says, of its concern that Iran was getting close to being nuclear capable, of having a nuclear weapon. Now, of course, the Trump administration, you mentioned it, Tom, the Trump administration was set for more talks with Iran on Sunday. There was still hope, according to President Trump, for negotiation. But now, overnight, these strikes, which, according to the Israelis, hit dozens of targets in different areas of Iran. And then this morning, we saw the first signs of Iran responding the way you're seeing now with Tel Aviv, with around 100 drones targeted towards Israel. Israel saying it managed to stop those. It looks like with some help from Arab neighbors like Jordan, that, by the way, will be causing other concerns in this region where I am, in the Gulf region. But now the question again is, how capable is Iran? It is believed to have some formidable armory. Is it now utilizing that? Or has Israel, because it's shown us pictures of it taking out Iranian defenses, has Israel managed to effectively defang Iran enough that it will be safe from reprisal, even if we are seeing potentially some Iranian munitions get through in these pictures now?
Yeah, the IDF has just put out a statement. I'm going to read this for our viewers here. This, of course, is the Israel Defense Forces. They're saying defense systems are operating to intercept the threat. The public is instructed to enter a protected space and remain there until further notice. You can see the smoke clouds above Tel Aviv tonight. They're saying these were missiles fired from Iran in retaliation for that Israeli strike. When we look at the pictures from Tehran, and again, this is Israel tonight. This is the Iron Dome in action here. But as we've explained with Keir, the Iron Dome at times can become overwhelmed if there are too many missiles, too many drones trying to come in at the same time, and really at the same target. And some missiles, some bombs can get through. It looks like, it appears from the images we're seeing tonight, that has happened in Israel right now. It is unclear if anyone is hurt. It is unclear if anyone is dead in Israel. We know that there were more than 200 targets in Tehran, in Iran last night. And when we look at the pictures of Iran, you can see the precision of some of those strikes. They were at buildings because they were targeting Iranian leadership, Iranian nuclear scientists, and also nuclear sites. But when we talk about nuclear sites, a lot of these labs, a lot of the work is done underground, sometimes half a mile underground, where bombs can't even reach them at times. Israel saying that they felt this was a successful strike. President Trump echoing that as well. I know Richard Engel is on the phone. As we get to Richard, I also want to ask our control room to put up a map for us, because I want to show our viewers here. Iran and Israel are so far from each other. You see it right here. We are not going to be talking about if this escalates into any type of ground war, at least not at this point. This is a war of missiles. This is a war of drones. And you can see the various countries that are in between Israel and Iran. It's an incredibly complicated situation now. Richard Engel has just come back from Iran. Richard, talk to us about some of your reporting when you were there. You were actually talking to some of the people that were targeted in these attacks last night.
So it's good to join you, but this is an extraordinary development. Yes, I was just in Iran twice on two separate visits, invited by the Iranian government. The Iranian government made it clear to me, as did many people in Iran, that they did not want to see this military action. They were committed to peace talks with the Trump administration. They had their hopes on reaching some sort of peace agreement. In fact, the Iranians were about to prepare this week a response that they were going to present to President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, on Sunday with a counterproposal. And now Iranian government officials are feeling betrayed. They're feeling angry. They're feeling that President Trump played them, that this whole negotiated effort was some sort of ruse to get them
Emma,
to put their guard down. And one of the Syrian top officials, an advisor to the supreme leader, who told me that they were committed to the talks, that they're willing to make compromises, someone who's not popular on the streets of Iran. He is considered a hardliner. He is considered someone who has been behind a lot of the crackdown on women's rights, crackdown on civil society there. He himself was targeted, and he had told me a short while ago, while I was in Tehran a few weeks ago, that he believed that the biggest threat to these negotiations was Prime Minister Netanyahu, that the Israelis were going to act to try and undermine the negotiations before they took place. Now we're seeing this response from Iran, according to our producer in Tehran. This is just the start. Iran is claiming that it is launching hundreds of ballistic missiles, so trying to overwhelm the Israeli missile defense systems, which include the Iron Dome and which include several other types of missile defense systems that can interpret ballistic missiles and other objects that fly at great speeds and at high altitudes. So I think all of the different weapon systems that Israel has are going to be utilized. And in the past, Iran has attacked Israel twice recently, in October and in April, and I watched both of them. There was a huge American involvement last time. The U.S. was hand in glove with Israel. And if that number of missiles is on its way to Israel, as the Iranians claim, it seems very likely that the Americans are going to be involved once again. And the Iranians are certainly holding the U.S. responsible.
Stand by for us. If we could re-rack that video we were just seeing, because it sort of showed how the Iron Dome is working right now in the skies over Tel Aviv. If we can get back to the top of that video, you see something coming in right here, then you can see it sort of exploding in the sky. You'll see two short blast. That is essentially the missile that is intercepting whatever is incoming from Iran to Israel. It stops it in the air to prevent it from obviously hitting anything on the ground. And it breaks it up into so many pieces. And you'll see that right now. It breaks up into so many pieces that it keeps the people in Israel safe, even though they've been alerted to go to bomb shelters. Richard, I do want to point out here, because Tehran, Iran's official state news agency, this is coming out of Tehran, I should say, and one of our producers there, has just put out a statement saying the hard retaliation operation has begun. Iran has launched a powerful and decisive response to the Zionist regime's recent brutal attack. I do want to point out something out here, and this is the video right here where you can see sort of the Iron Dome in action as things are intercepted in the sky in real time, and you can see them kind of sort of falling much slower. You see the interceptions right there, those big flashes happening. Richard, what's different from this attack and the other attack is that both Israel and Iran were sort of attacking on the outskirts, if you will. But these attacks, the attack last night and the attack happening right now, are happening at population centers. On top of that, I will remind you, Richard, the language coming out of Iran after that first attack, essentially saying it is over, right? I even think they use that kind of language there. I'm paraphrasing, but they use some kind of phrase saying either it's over or it's ended, essentially saying it's a back and forth, it's over, we're going to move on now. Richard, this feels much different tonight.
This is much different, and what caused it is much different. If you go back, there have been the first time that Iran ever attacked Israel was not that long ago, and it now seems commonplace. But the first time was after Israel attacked a diplomatic compound of Iran, a diplomatic building in Syria, and killed several Revolutionary Guard generals. That's what prompted Iran's first response. And Iran's military response at the time was very measured. It was very calculated. It almost seemed designed to fail. They told the Israelis that the attack was coming. They launched it with drones, and you've shown the map. You've shown how far those drones would need to fly. Ample time for air defenses to get ready to shoot them down. They had to cross over several countries. Most of the drones never even made it to Israel. Then Iran said it would be firing ballistic missiles, but also told the world where they would be coming, when they would be coming. The next response that Iran carried out, its next military attack against Israel, was after Israel assassinated the leader of Hezbollah. That was a more intense attack because they had killed one of Iran's main military allies in the Middle East, and they needed to up the response. What has happened now is Iran's response to what it believes was a full-blown act of war, that its nuclear facilities were attacked. Prime Minister Netanyahu is promising an open campaign that could last days or weeks. They also took out several of the top military leaders in the country, including Revolutionary Guard leaders. They targeted them in their homes, in their residences, in Tehran and in other military compounds. They targeted the person that I was just telling about that I interviewed in Tehran, who was one of the most senior advisors to the supreme leader. So this was also a leadership decapitation attack. So now they're responding as if this was a full-blown war launched under that Israel launched under the guise of U.S.-led negotiations. So many Iranians in the government feel they were betrayed and they need to respond.
Richard, stand by for us because we're watching some new video that's just coming into the newsroom. We're still seeing Israel's Iron Dome. That's essentially the air defense system over the country that protects it from incoming missiles from enemy nations. Tonight, it is trying to protect the people of Israel from the attack, the retaliatory strikes from Iran. You can see a missile right there. It got through the Iron Dome, it looks like, getting dangerously close to the ground into buildings there. Because when the system gets overwhelmed, some missiles, some drones can get into Tel Aviv. We've been seeing those plumes of smoke, so we know that there's some damage. Matt Bradley, our correspondent in Tel Aviv tonight, is going to join us live right now. Matt, first off, tell our viewers where you're reporting from. Are you in a safe spot, and what's happening over your head tonight?
That's right, Tom. We're in a safe room, which is required in almost every building in Israel, and there's public safe rooms all throughout the country. They are being put to good use tonight as we're seeing this massive influx of missiles, which are ongoing. We saw that first wave, the IDF texting me and saying that they're going to be seeing another wave, dozens of missiles. The Iranians are calling it the hard retaliation operation. And so far, we've been hearing from even inside this safe room, outgoing missiles. We've been hearing impacts. And in fact, we just opened the door and we could smell debris and dust coming from outside. It is just all over the city right now. Now, we understand from emergency services that 7 people have been wounded and that 7 sites were struck all around the city here in Tel Aviv. Now, if you remember last time back in October, there was another major attack, and it looked as though there was a lot of damage, a lot of strikes that actually made impact, and that it was overwhelming Israel's formidable missile defense system. We don't know whether this is going to be the same. These are ballistic missiles that the Iranians say they're launching. They say hundreds of them. Now, as I said, we've also been hearing quite a bit of outgoing missiles, striking these incoming missiles. We've been hearing that, basically late last night, and just now, we're hearing a lot of debris. Everybody is hunkered down. It really is a terrifying night here.
Yeah, Matt, and it's not just Tel Aviv, it's also Jerusalem as well. We're seeing video of the Iron Dome in action over eastern Jerusalem. Matt, I do want you to explain to our viewers why Iran is targeting Tel Aviv. Some of the key government buildings, leadership is there in Tel Aviv, really the center of Israel in a lot of ways in how the country operates. Do we have any idea what was targeted yet, or is it too early?
Well, actually, we don't. And in fact, the IDF has said and called upon the public not to share the sites, the locations that have been targeted. They're saying that could allow the Iranians, to aim better, to strike with more accuracy if they suddenly see people on social media describing what they've seen, describing the impacts. So if we did know, I also wouldn't really be able to tell you. But the fact is that you're right. Tel Aviv is the beating heart of the government here, the Ministry of Defense. Everything is focused here, intelligence agencies. Jerusalem is the capital as far as the Israelis are concerned. That's very controversial, of course, and the subject of much dispute. But here in Tel Aviv, major office buildings, the vast majority of embassies, this is where the Iranians would want to strike. Now, as far as the Iranians are concerned, they don't necessarily see a civilian target as a civilian target and something to be avoided. This is occupied Palestine, and that's what they've been saying in their social media. So to them, this whole country might be a target. We're still seeing this evolve. We don't know what the damage looks like outside. But now we're hearing once again, Tom, that air raid siren coming in. That second wave of missiles, it sounds like, have just broken into the airspace, and we're probably going to start to hear them making impact and probably start to hear them being intercepted. You can hear that now.
Yeah, Matt, tell our viewers what exactly is happening right now. What's that noise we just heard?
Well, you can hear it outside. This is the air raid siren for all of Tel Aviv, and we also are going to be getting it on our phone. The Israelis have an app here that goes for tells which regions are going to be subject to these air raid sirens. And right now, it looks as though it's much of Tel Aviv, much of Jerusalem, as you mentioned, military sites and civilian areas throughout the country. I can't tell you a lot about what's going on. I think we're about to see. Yeah, here we go. In about 1.5 minutes, they say that we're going to be seeing the impacts of this latest round of incoming missiles.
And
so
Matt,
this
I
is
want to
very
remind
precise.
our viewers,
They know the trajectory.
Yeah, and I want to remind our viewers, we're watching this in real time
Go ahead.
live. We're watching this live. These are the missiles coming in from Iran right now, and the Iron Dome in action. Matt Bradley, who is there in Tel Aviv in a safe bunker, is reporting to us now that Israel has notified its people, especially in Tel Aviv, that an onslaught of missiles is about a minute away. Matt, you can pick it up from there.
Yeah, so we're about to see what looks like the second wave so far of this Iranian retaliation. They said that was about 1.5 minutes ago. It probably is going to be less than a minute at this point when we're going to start hearing impacts, hearing outgoing, which is what we heard just a moment ago, and hearing interceptions. So this is something we're probably going to be hearing. We don't know how long this is going to be taking, but it looks as though this retaliation has very much begun in a very muscular way, using, according to the Iranians, ballistic missiles. Now, the Israelis, in their initial strike overnight, they were careful to hit a lot of those ballistic missile sites. According to Israeli media, they even had Mossad intelligence agents on the ground in Israel painting those targets, showing them showing the Israeli military and the Israeli Air Force where to strike in order to knock those out. It looks as though the Iranians still have some capability. What we're seeing right now, Tom, is very interesting as well as terrifying. This really an exposition of just what kind of capabilities the Iranians have left after that very thorough set of attacks that happened all night long. This has been an open question all day. How will Iran retaliate, and whether or not it even has the power to retaliate, given that the top echelon of its military has been taken out, given that much of its, again, air defense capabilities and its offensive capabilities, these ballistic missiles, had been taken out. A lot of its nuclear sites had been completely destroyed. So now we're getting a real taste of just what impact those Israeli strikes had and what the Iranians are going to be capable of doing.
And that, as you were reporting, Iran has now put it out, but we've known this from your report about a minute ago. They're now saying a second wave of 200 ballistic missiles has been fired. They are sort of telegraphing some of their moves here, which is somewhat interesting, and we can also speak to the temperature and maybe how far they want to escalate this. If you're watching our coverage right now, we are covering live right now. Israel is under attack. These are the retaliatory strikes from Iran after Israel launched their attack last night on Tehran and various nuclear sites and the chain of command in Iran. Israel has been struck. It is unclear what's been hit. Earlier in the night, we were seeing plumes of smoke. The Iron Dome, which is the air defense system for Israel, is operating, but it has been bombarded with missiles and possibly drones. And if it gets overwhelmed, some missiles can come through. If you're watching the screen right now, you can see things falling out of the sky. If they're not coming down at a rapid pace, that is the Iron Dome that has intercepted missiles, and some of the debris is coming down. If you see from the ground up missiles coming up, that is the Iron Dome that's intercepting those missiles. You can see the explosions there moments ago. That means that the missile from Israel has intercepted whatever's coming from Iran. But you can see how much action is happening right now in the skies over Tel Aviv. Look at all those. I mean, those are both missiles coming from Israel to intercept them. But like we said, 200 ballistic missiles coming in from Iran. It looks like that one right there got through. It hits the ground and obviously explodes, or hits the target and there's an explosion. Matt Bradley, rightly so, reported how Israel does not want any information out about what has been struck, because we have to understand they are under attack right now, right? This is the middle of combat right now, and they're going to be very careful on what they release. Their main concern right now is protecting the people of Israel, making sure its citizens know what's happening right now, and, of course, planning the next step, Matt, which you think will likely be what from Israel?
Well, we don't know exactly. I mean, the next step and I just want to tell you, I just got a message from the IDF saying that those explosions are from interceptions or fallen projectiles. Now, obviously, from where we're sitting, I can't tell whether this is an interception or whether that's an actual impact of a full ballistic missile. Now, what the Israelis are going to do next, well, Tom, it's hard to imagine escalating this situation any further, given the nature of the attacks overnight and continuing throughout the day. There isn't much room left for further escalation. But that is one of the things that the Iranians are going to have to be calculating. They're trying to measure whether or not they're going to be stepping back from the brink. You mentioned how they're broadcasting all of this. This is clearly for domestic and international consumption. They want to show that they're putting on a brave face and that they're standing up to the Zionist entity, as they call them, and really responding in a muscular way to these attacks. But they also don't want to provoke Israel to make any more launches against further sites in Iran. And what they really, really don't want, Tom, is to bring the United States and its allies into the fight directly with Iran. That would be a major escalation. We've already seen that the United States is parking more naval assets off the Mediterranean coast and the Mediterranean Sea. It looks as though they're getting ready for defensive capabilities. The United States has said that they are not planning on joining in with Israel in fighting against Iran. But if the Iranians start to attack American military installations, and of course, just a couple of days ago, we saw that the State Department withdrew non-essential military personnel and non-essential diplomatic personnel from diplomatic installations throughout the Middle East, family members, all in anticipation of this region-wide war. So this is a very threatening situation, not just for the Israeli presence here, for the Israeli nation, but also for those American military and diplomatic installations throughout the world or throughout the region. The Iranians are going to have to be very, very careful, and this is going to have to be a response that, again, will show that they're standing up to Israel, but not so much that they invite a terrible...
Tehran time, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., really a surprise attack. This retaliatory strike from Iran to Israel is happening around 8 p.m. local in Israel, 9:30 right now, 9:48 we should say right now. Not as late, not as much of a surprise. Can we read anything into that?
Well, I think it's taken the Iranians some time to figure out what's going on. This morning, when Iranian officials themselves were being targeted in their own homes, they were hiding for their lives. Some of them were in bunkers. Some of them were in meetings. They were trying to figure out who was alive, who was injured. And I think some of this is just them needing time to come up with a response. We also heard a speech from Iran's supreme leader. We talk about how Iran has a government, or it's often referred to as the Iranian regime. It is a theocracy led by a cleric, an Ayatollah, the supreme leader. And the supreme leader just spoke, and he said what the response would be. So I don't think you could see a response, or we were going to see a response, until it was laid out by the country's theocracy, by the supreme leader. He just said a short while ago that there's going to be this painful response, and then now we're seeing this response just a short time later. And to elaborate on those extraordinary pictures which you're highlighting, the things coming up from the ground, those are Iron Dome or other missile defense systems, and the rockets that they are shooting up, these interceptor rockets, are relatively small. Imagine the size of a fire hydrant or a parking meter. And the things that they're shooting down, the incoming ballistic missiles, are roughly the size of a city bus. So you have these small rockets going up and hitting much longer ballistic missiles. And the ballistic missiles fly at extraordinary speed. Almost all of them are filled with fuel, and then you can put whatever kind of explosive war tip you want, warhead, on the ballistic missile. So these are large missiles that have been fired all the way from Iran and are now making impact, or not making impact, being destroyed before they would make impact in the skies over Tel Aviv.
Richard, what did you think of Iran essentially announcing to the world that they've launched the second round of their 200 ballistic missiles? Essentially, I don't know if they're telegraphing here, and again, you know, in war you can't really read things, but how do you interpret that?
They're 100% telegraphing. Yeah. They're announcing the number. They're announcing the time. That is to send a message, as Matt was just saying, to their own people. Iran, the Iranian regime, is not universally popular. It is not going through a period of strength. Iran has lost its defensive capability in the region. It has lost Hamas. It has lost Hezbollah. The Houthis are not as strong as they used to be. It has lost Syria, which was the main transit point for weapons. one of the main reasons that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is doing this attack now is because he can. He can, and he's long wanted to do it. He said he's long wanted to do it, and he saw this as an opportunity because Iran is so weak. Iran can't show weakness. It can't show that it is willing to accept all of its nuclear program to be destroyed, its leaders killed, its military commanders killed, and not respond somehow. So it's projecting, perhaps to contain the situation and not go out of control, as Matt was suggesting. But I think more importantly, it's signaling to the Iranian people that it still has power, that it is not finished, and it is signaling to the military leadership that they shouldn't give up hope.
And we've just gotten some breaking news from our producer there. Tehran has announced now a third round of ballistic missiles that they have just launched against Israel. And our teams there are in a bunker. They are protected. We will get Matt Bradley as soon as he's back up again. They're taking shelter for right now. As soon as he's back up, we're going to bring him to you live. But they are expecting another incoming round of hundreds, potentially, ballistic missiles. As Richard was saying, telegraphing this attack, possibly to contain this, but also sending a message to the Iranian people that they have these weapons, that they are fighting back after those devastating strikes yesterday. And Richard, if you can sort of put into context Israel's strike, right, on Tehran last night, because it was incredibly crippling.
Very much so. This is the big one that everyone had been fearing, that everyone had been concerned about. Iran and Israel have had a low-level war for many years right now. Israel has been killing Iranian scientists and killed Iranian military commanders, but it has done them in generally very sophisticated plots, attaching magnetic bombs to the sides of their vehicles, or using a machine gun mounted on a robotic mount that was remotely controlled. They have carried out some strikes directly against Iran, but not on this scale, not targeting the nuclear facilities directly, not targeting them in dozens of locations. This is a much larger scale attack, which raises the question, what is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's ultimate objective here? Does he just want to set back the nuclear program, or is he aiming for regime change? Is he trying to decapitate the regime?
We are watching live pictures over Tel Aviv because we're expecting that third round of strikes that Iran has announced. If our director, Christian Alasea, can re-rack that video he just played. Richard, I don't know if you can watch our coverage, but we just got some new video out of Tel Aviv of the Iron Dome in action. This is it right here. I want you to watch because there is something. It's either a missile, a projectile, or it might just be debris that comes in real fast from the sky. It'll come down. You'll see it in a second. I want to get your take right here. Richard, I know it's hard. We don't know exactly what's happening, but what do you think happened there? Do you think that's debris, or do you think that's possibly a drone missile coming in from Iran?
You're talking about the thing that came down and it appeared to speed up at the last minute.
It went pretty fast. It's going to happen again. You're going to see it right here again. It's going to go from left to right on the screen. It falls straight down.
Yeah, it's hard to know, but there is a danger in using these interceptors, because what they do, imagine a small rocket. I was saying it's like a fire hydrant or a parking meter going to hit a bus. When you hit that ballistic missile, you break it into pieces. So it's very possible the engine sped off, and then the engine had its own momentum and drove into the ground. You're breaking the missile up. People have been killed in Israel by this falling debris, even if it doesn't have the fuel in it. By the time the missiles are arriving in Tel Aviv, they don't have very much fuel left, but they have enough. So you're hitting something that is full of fuel, that has an explosive warhead on it, and you're breaking it into pieces over a civilian city. So depending on how you break it, it will depend on how it flies.
We should throw that map up just to remind our viewers how far these two countries are from each other and why this will be a missile drone war more than a ground war as we've known traditionally to understand war. But that has changed in itself because of the modern age. I do want to bring in NBC News military analyst Steph Twitty. He's a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General. Lieutenant General, if you can, we've been playing this video. Walk our viewers through what you're seeing, the Iron Dome in action. We are also waiting on that third round of strikes that Iran has announced on Israel as well.
Before I do that, let me just highlight the missile that you're just talking about. if the missile follows the trajectory like a rainbow and comes down in its flight path, like you're seeing, it is landing and nothing has intercepted it. If it comes down erratically in pieces like you're seeing now, that means it was hit by an air defense system. So that's how you really tell whether or not the missile was hit or not. And so I just wanted to make sure that I add that.
And Lieutenant General, I mean, and Richard pointed this out, it is still incredibly dangerous because you have this debris raining down from hundreds of feet in the sky.
Absolutely. Couple other things I want to point out here. When I look at the pictures here, and granted, I'm looking at a screen and I'm not on the ground, this does not appear to me an overly complicated attack. What you want to do is provide your adversary, your enemy, in this case, Israel, multiple dilemmas. That means you're putting grounds such as covert operations in to try and disrupt on the ground. You're putting cyber in to try and disrupt communications. You're putting electronic warfare in to reduce the radars that are being projected right now to identify these weapon systems. You got Air Force jets coming over top of this and landing bombs. So right now, this is one-dimensional. You're looking at ballistic missiles. You may be looking at some drones. So this is not a complicated attack. And so my sense is that the Israelis will be able to handle this. The other thing is we got to watch out for is, as we know, the Houthis down south, they still have some pretty good capability. Will they join in on this fight? And I know Hezbollah and I know Hamas have been seriously degraded, but there are some lone wolves out there that'll pick up a missile in a minute and start throwing missiles into Israel. So we need to watch that piece. The final thing I would tell you is, as this goes on, that is U.S. interests. We have U.S. forces there. We have a bunch of civilians there. Will they be attacked? And that will tell us something, whether or not they will be attacked or not, whether Iran wants to escalate this thing or not. Final point I want to mention, you asked, okay, so where do we go from here? Remember, the mission is not to kill 5 generals or 3 generals and 5 nuclear scientists. That's not the mission. The mission here is to degrade Iran's nuclear capability or destroy it. And so my sense is that this is going to go on for a while because the Israelis, they hit Natanz, but they haven't hit 2 other critical nuclear facilities. And that is Fordow, which is about 100 miles north of Natanz. And then there's another nuclear facility, I have to look at my notes here, Articon, which is about 100 miles to the south. Those are the 2 biggest strategic nuclear locations for the Iranians. And that's where they're doing most of the Iranian military enrichment. Yeah. And so still a lot of work to do to degrade that capability.
We are still waiting on that third attack, that third round of incoming missiles and or drones that Iran has announced. We have gotten Matt Bradley back. I do want to tell you we're going to go to the White House in a moment with our correspondent Monica Alba to update us about what's happening over there. But I do want to go back to Matt because he's in Tel Aviv inside that bunker. Matt, what can you tell our viewers?
Yeah, well, I can tell you right now we have an update on the injuries from emergency officials. 5 injured people, 1 in moderate condition, 4 lightly injured by shrapnel. This, according to the Israeli Emergency Services. 4 people were suffering from anxiety and were also treated. I can tell you it's a very anxious moment, a terrifying moment here in Tel Aviv. Now, as I mentioned, the Israelis have said, the IDF, that those impacts that everybody's hearing here were actually interceptions, and that it was debris falling from those interceptions. But as I told you a moment ago, Tom, when we open the door here, we can smell the debris coming in. We can smell the dust. It's that vivid. It's that close. It's all over this city. So, as we mentioned, actually earlier today, we did hear that the Israelis said that they were targeting, or at least Iranian state media said that there were impacts around that Fordo military facility. Now, that's that facility, their enrichment facility for nuclear weapons that's deep inside a mountain. That was the big prize. And if you don't get Fordo, you're not going to be getting the Iranian nuclear program. But apparently, we've been hearing, and also from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he said that it looks as though these are, that they're about to turn their guns on this. So it looks as though they are trying to degrade going further in degrading some of these nuclear capabilities beyond just the site at Natanz, which it sounds like, from the Israelis' perspective at least, has been completely destroyed. So this is an ongoing attack. It's really hard to see, again, how the Israelis would retaliate to this retaliation, because the Israelis have already launched such an unprecedented, sweeping strike against so many sites in Iran. So no matter how much pain Iran tries to inflict on the Israelis, it's hard to see how the Israelis would be able to ramp it up and punish Iran even further in retaliation for their retaliation.
And we should also
ongoing on both sides.
We should remind our viewers the only information we're getting now, besides what we're seeing on the ground, is coming from each government, right? It's coming from Iran and it's coming from Israel. Israel essentially telegraphing, I would argue, that this attack has not been successful, that only 5 people have been injured, and there are 4 people suffering from anxiety when Iran is saying they've launched hundreds of missiles towards Israel. And Matt rightly so reminding us, though, Israel is still under attack right now. And so Israel's being very careful about the information they want to release. They do not want to say what has been targeted. They do not want to say if anything has been successfully hit yet. And what they're putting out in the public is that they've intercepted every missile, essentially, and that what's coming down over Tel Aviv, the skies we've been seeing, is debris. It's essentially missiles that have been intercepted and been broken up into the sky. I do want to go to Monica Alba. She's at the White House. We're going to stay watching Tel Aviv live, so we'll be able to see both at the same time. Monica, the president sort of sent 2 messages, right? The first being he supports Israel, but that the U.S. had no part of this attack, the initial attack on Tehran.
That's right, Tom. That is what he said publicly, and it is notable what he hasn't said in some time. And there has been a bit of a silence here from the White House as they are all monitoring what's unfolding in real time. We know that the president had scheduled a meeting with his top national security aides in the Situation Room for 11 a.m. today. That was the only thing that was on his schedule, and there's nothing currently public or open for him to appear before cameras or the press. And I think that's by design. They are sitting back and taking this all in, as it is, of course, happening, and we're watching. And they are also trying to figure out how diplomatically they're going to play this, because you did see a couple of different messages from the president, who, as recently as yesterday, was saying that he didn't think an attack was going to be imminent from Israel into Iran, but that it very possibly could happen. And we know also, Tom, that he has had several conversations with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu in recent days. The 2 men, I'm told, were scheduled to speak again today. We haven't gotten any kind of a readout or details of how they discussed this, what role, if any, the U.S. would have played in the actions yesterday, or now in the defensive posture of Israel as we're seeing these retaliatory strikes today. So those are the 2 really major questions. But we do know that the president spoke with our own colleague Garrett Hake earlier this morning, saying and putting this into the context of the current negotiations that the U.S. was involved in with Iran, that they missed a great opportunity to come to an agreement that would curb their nuclear capabilities. And he said, and he put it into a forward-looking posture and said, but they could have another opportunity. They could still change that. We'll see. So that's the president, who usually has this art of the deal approach to a lot of the worldwide negotiations that the U.S. is a part of, indicating that. But also, he was quick to point out that the equipment that was used yesterday in Israel's attack on Iran was much of it provided by the U.S. He called it great military equipment, much of which was American. He wanted to be sure to point that out. But this is also a really delicate moment where we know that technically there were some talks that were going to be scheduled for Sunday in Oman that would have included top Middle East advisor and envoy Steve Witkoff, who up until today, I'm told just a few hours ago, was was still hoping to take part in those talks in some way, though we know that Iran, through their state media, has indicated that those talks are off for now. So again, Tom, I'm looking down at my phone just to see if there are any changes, but we haven't heard from President Trump in the last couple of hours. I've been in touch with his aides. One tea leaf that we like to look for here is that there is a Marine stationed outside of the West Wing, which often but not always indicates that the president is working somewhere in the West Wing. So he could be in the Situation Room, he could be taking meetings, he could be briefed on this repeatedly. I imagine a combination of all of those things have been taking place as we are watching this play out in real time. Tom.
Yeah, and Iran announcing that those nuclear negotiations with the U.S. have now been suspended because of the attack. I want to go back to Matt Bradley. Matt, we had received reports from our producer in Iran that they had announced a third wave of ballistic missiles. We've been watching for you. We've been watching for our viewers here. We haven't seen that happen just quite yet. Do we think that that may have already occurred, or it could have been a head fake, or it may eventually happen? And I know a lot of this is sort of a guessing game.
Well, that's news to me, Tom. I haven't heard from the IDF, who are sending me regular updates about that third wave, but I think we can anticipate that there would be. We heard two so far. The first one sounded, at least from where I'm standing here, even inside this protected room, sounded extremely destructive. And again, as I was saying, we could smell it. We could smell the debris and the dust coming in from outside. So if there's a third wave, well, it looks as though, as far as the Israelis are concerned, that they've done a pretty good job of swatting all of these missiles, all of these projectiles out of the air. As you mentioned, as I told you just a moment ago, they said there were only 5 injuries, and there were a couple more because of anxiety attacks. All of these people are being treated now. So it looks as though the Israelis are, as you said, either they're projecting that this has not been a successful attack, or it hasn't been, and that the 3-ply system that the Israelis use, we're talking, it's not just the Iron Dome, it's also David's sling, the arrow system, all of these used in concert together to protect Israeli airspace from incoming projectiles, and all of them, different systems used for different trajectories. For the smaller grade weapons that are coming in, it's a different system than for the longer range missiles that are coming, like the ballistic missiles that we're supposedly seeing from the Iranians. So this is a very comprehensive system, and one that has been used to great effect over the past couple of months, and particularly was used to great effect back in October, the last time that the Iranians fired here on Tel Aviv. And remember, we saw images just like the ones we're seeing now back in October, when it really looked like Tel Aviv was being battered, it was on fire, we saw smoke rising. And then in the end, it looked as though there wasn't all that much of an impact, and certainly not that many injuries, partly because of these air raid sirens, and partly because every building, every home in Israel has one of these safe rooms inside of it.
A bit of fog of war there. I will say this, but from covering the war with Hamas as well and being there in Tel Aviv, the smoke clouds that we were seeing tonight were significant over Tel Aviv, those sort of first images we had seen. But again, for right now, Israel's saying that those were debris, essentially debris raining down after intercepting those Iranian missiles. Matt, I think it's important to remind our viewers how we got here, right? Because just a couple of weeks ago, we're talking about Israel and Hamas and what's happening in Gaza and peace negotiations and trying to get hostages back from Israel, even Israeli-American hostages back out of Gaza to get them home. And now we have this issue with Iran, right, that sort of popped up over the last 2 weeks. And what's happened is that experts, inspectors are saying Iran was getting closer and closer to enriching uranium to get close to possibly making a bomb, at the same time trying to reopen negotiations with the U.S., and then Israel has attacked. And explain to our viewers why Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, how he explained it to his people yesterday.
That's right, when we've just seen the opening of yet another chapter in that long saga just tonight. And this is a long saga. It didn't start just on October 7th, about a year and a half ago. But we actually heard from Benjamin Netanyahu earlier today. He gave a speech to his public where he really actually laid down a lot of that timeline. And he mentioned how back last year when they assassinated, I don't know if you remember this, Tom, I was actually in Beirut at the time when the Israelis killed Hassan Nasrallah. We were really just down the street. It was a huge bomb that went off buried underground and killed Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, along with many of his top deputies, all in an underground bunker in the neighborhood of Dahia outside of Beirut. So Benjamin Netanyahu told the public here that after Nasrallah was killed, and Hezbollah, which he led, is the cat's paw for Iran. It's the main proxy group. And until October 7th, it was considered the primary threat to Israel. They decided that Iran was going to make a dash for nuclear weapons. And that's why Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, said that they decided to act now. He actually said that the plan had been put in motion and was supposed to attack Iran back in April. So that was, a couple of months ago. So it looks as though this was something that had been in the works for quite a while and that there was fits and starts a little bit. It doesn't look as though, given that this plan had been in the books, if we're to believe what Benjamin Netanyahu was saying, that the United States was necessarily playing along with Israel with these nuclear negotiations. There was some speculation here in the media that the nuclear negotiations that Donald Trump and Washington had been leading with Iran were essentially a ruse to try to, lure Tehran into complacency and open it up for just this kind of attack. I spoke with a prominent defense analyst and intelligence expert here. He said he doesn't believe that's true, that the Trump administration genuinely did want to come to some sort of deal with Iran to replace the JCPOA that was done by the Obama administration back in 2015, that Trump himself withdrew from back in 2018. But now it looks as though the Israelis basically felt, even with this sixth round of negotiations that was supposed to take place just on Sunday, just 2 days from now, that they should strike Iran, that they should knock out all of its nuclear capabilities, and that they didn't have that much time. One thing that was buried in a lot of the headlines over the past couple of days is that the IAEA, the United Nations nuclear watchdog, came out and voted, their board voted and said for the first time in 20 years that Iran wasn't obeying its obligations to the UN nuclear watchdog, that it was in fact enriching uranium or wasn't obeying the procedures, was violating the code set forth by the IAEA, and that was a cause for concern. So it was only about 24 hours after that announcement that we saw this huge, comprehensive Israeli strike. So it looks as though there was real concern in the halls of power here in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem that Iran was within striking distance of getting a nuclear weapon and potentially using it. And that's why Benjamin Netanyahu, when he spoke to the public just today, he said that this was an existential threat, that either they acted now and possibly invited a fierce, deadly retaliation from the Iranians, or, he said, the Iranians would kill us all.
I do want to read some news just in. This is from Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz. He says Iran crossed red lines when it dared to fire missiles at civilian population centers in Israel. We will continue to protect the citizens of Israel and ensure that the Ayatollah regime pays a very heavy price for its criminal actions. I don't know how much we can read into that statement, Matt. You cover Israel a lot more than many of us have. You're there, based there right now for us. Do you think this is the end of it, or do you think this back and forth continues right now, or is it just way too early to answer that question?
It's the million-dollar question, Tom, because as I was telling you earlier, what we're seeing now is going to reveal a lot about the Iranian capabilities left over by that huge Israeli attack. Remember, the Israelis, they weren't just attacking the nuclear scientists, the top leaders of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They weren't just attacking these nuclear facilities and sites around the country. They also attacked ballistic missile sites, and we're seeing these ballistic missiles now raining down on Israel. They also attacked anti-air defenses in Iran. So it looks as though they were taking out a lot of different military installations. And what we're seeing now falling out of the sky on Israel and here on Tel Aviv is basically what's left of the Iranian military capabilities following that unprecedented overnight attack. So whether or not it stops, whether or not it keeps going for days and days and days, that will tell us a lot about how much damage the Israelis were able to do, how capable the Iranians were able to recover their military capabilities after such a stinging blow from the Israelis, and whether or not they're going to be able to continue to enrich uranium from now on. Remember, we'd heard earlier today that the Natanz facility, one of the main nuclear enrichment facilities, was almost completely destroyed. Well, just in the past couple of hours, we've heard from Iranian state television that there were explosions around the Fordow facility. That's the one that's buried deep inside the mountains that's so hard to get to. So it looks as though the Israelis have put the entire uranium enrichment program of the Iranians in their crosshairs, and they're taking them out one by one.
All right, Matt, stand by for us. I do want to go back to our Richard angle, because, Richard, when we talk about America's role in all of this, we spoke earlier with Monica, the president saying both that they had nothing to do with Israel's initial attack, and then today the president also saying that they provided American weaponry for that attack. But again, Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that, again, the Iranians should not target any Americans in the region. But I wonder, you have Israel now still sort of involved in Gaza. You have this issue with Iran, and then constantly on defense because of bad actors in the region who either want to commit terrorist acts or just attack them, rebel groups that are launching missiles at Israel. And America is their biggest partner. At some point, America will have to do something in this conflict if it continues.
It is very difficult, if not impossible, for the United States to separate itself from this conflict. The Trump administration wants to say, oh, we had nothing to do with it, we weren't involved, although they were our weapons. But the U.S. is Israel's main backer. The U.S. has been backing Israel throughout the war in Gaza. The war in Gaza is the main conflict that everyone in the region across the Middle East thinks about on a daily basis. President Trump just did a Middle East tour. He was just in Saudi Arabia. He was just in the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, doing billions of dollars worth of business deals, talking about his great friends in the Middle East. All of those friends came out today and condemned this operation by Israel. All of them. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, the UAE, all said that this was an unnecessary and provocative act. The Gulf countries were just the ones that President Trump was courting, and they were courting him. So this will be very difficult for the United States to back out of. Iran certainly believes the United States is part and parcel of this, because the United States was carrying out negotiations, was in midstream in high-level negotiations when this surprise attack took place. So from the Iranian perspective, they were duped, and the U.S. was party to that scheme. Whether that's how it played out or not, that is how it is being perceived in Iran. Another reason why it will be difficult to extricate from this. And I've been speaking today to very senior leaders across the Middle East, and they're not as convinced of the Israeli argument as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seems to be. They have heard many assessments in the past that Iran is 6 months away from a nuclear bomb, a year away from a nuclear bomb. They've been assessments like this coming out for years, yet Iran never built the nuclear weapon. So there's a great deal of skepticism. Arab leaders I've spoken to believe that this has to do with domestic politics in Israel, that Prime Minister Netanyahu's facing a weak coalition, that his far-right partners potentially could abandon him, so that it is not as simple as this is Israel acting to save itself and acting in the benefit of the world, which is how Prime Minister Netanyahu presented it, but that it is there is a domestic component, a Prime Minister Netanyahu specific component for him trying to save his own career.
We do want to tell our viewers we're waiting on a piece of video. Benjamin Netanyahu has addressed the people of Israel right now. We're going to play that video as soon as we can turn it around. We understand he's told them that this is one of the greatest military operations in Israel's history. They're calling this one Operation Rising Lion. Again, we're going to have to wait and see till we get more comments from that. I'm going to let our Matt Bradley read through that speech, and we'll come back to him in a second once he can give us a readout of what he said. Richard, as we go to you, and you've covered so many of these conflicts, so many of these wars. It is quiet right now in Tel Aviv for the time being. Again, there could be another surprise attack. But what we saw in the beginning was 2 rounds of a lot of missiles and a lot of, counter military action as well in the skies over Tel Aviv. Do you think for the moment it is stopped, or are we just, it's too early to know if Iran is going to attack again?
I think it's unlikely to be over. I think the Israelis don't seem to be over. The ambition and the scale that Prime Minister Netanyahu was talking about doesn't seem to have been quite achieved yet. Maybe there's a lull. Maybe that lull continues through the night. But I think there will be several more rounds of this going forward, because the Israelis have had time to prepare for this. They knew it was coming. They launched the attack. It was a surprise attack from Tehran's point of view, but the Israelis had time to get the weapons in order, get the aircraft, train for it. They had two other, they've gone through this twice before recently, where they had to both go through Iranian air defenses and deal with Iranian incoming fire. So they would have had their defenses prepped, and there's no indication that the mission that they began, which Netanyahu, as you say, is describing one of the most as one of the most spectacular in Israel's history, is completely over. Netanyahu himself said it could last days or weeks, and if he wants to eliminate all of the Iranian nuclear capabilities, they probably still have quite a bit of work.
And this is interesting, Richard. The speech from Benjamin Netanyahu, or at least this statement, it's actually addressed to the Iranian people. And I want to read a portion of this to our viewers now. I'm being told by our control room we have it. Let's play this and listen.
Tonight I wish to speak to you, the proud people of Iran. We're in the midst of one of the greatest military operations in history, Operation Rising Lion. The Islamic regime, which has oppressed you for nearly 50 years, threatens to destroy my country, the State of Israel. The objective of Israel's military operation is to remove this threat, both the nuclear threat and the ballistic missile threat to Israel. And as we achieve our objectives, we're also clearing the path for you to achieve your objective, which is freedom. In the past 24 hours, we've taken out top military commanders, senior nuclear scientists, the Islamic regime's most significant enrichment facility, and a large portion of its ballistic missile arsenal. More is on the way. The regime doesn't know what hit them. They don't know what will hit them. The nation of Iran and the nation of Israel have been true friends since the days of Cyrus the Great. And the time has come for you to unite around your flag and your historic legacy by standing up for your freedom from an evil and oppressive regime. It has never been weaker. This is your opportunity to stand up and let your voices be heard. Woman, life, freedom. Zan, Zandegi, Azadi. As I said yesterday and many times before, Israel's fight is not with you. It's not with you, the brave people of Iran, whom we respect and admire. Our fight is with our common enemy, a murderous regime that both oppresses you and impoverishes you. Brave people of Iran, your light will defeat the darkness. I am with you. The people of Israel are with you.
We've just been listening there to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I was taking notes here. Richard, quite a speech for two reasons. One, announcing to the Iranian people they are not done with the attack, threatening more attacks on Iran, but also calling for the people of Iran to rise up, saying that the country of Iran has never been weaker and that your light will defeat the darkness, talking about the Ayatollah here. Quite the move from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, not only launching an attack on Iran, but trying to start, if you will, a counter-revolution within the country, which is going to be incredibly difficult. What happens now, Richard, do you think, in Iran with the Ayatollah and, of course, the Revolutionary Guard that backs him?
So I think they've answered our question that we were talking about a moment ago. Is this operation from Israel over? No. What is the objective? Prime Minister Netanyahu just laid it out. He wants regime change, and he's telling the Iranian people the time has come for them to rise up, that he is helping them, that he is weakening the regime, that he's taking out its top leaders, he's taking out some of the weapons, and now he wants them to step up, go out onto the streets, and embrace a new future. It's unclear if they're going to do that. It's unclear if they're able to do that, because while Iran has been weakened tremendously because it's lost its proxies, it's lost Hamas, it's lost Hezbollah, it's lost Syria, it still has its police forces, it still has its intelligence forces, it still has the ability to conduct surveillance, it still can watch the streets and crack down. But the weaker it is, the more it's focused on defending itself, the more the generals are on the run, hiding, afraid for their own lives, the less they will be able to oppress the people, the less they will be able to run those surveillance systems. It's a very delicate moment. I know a lot of Iranians. I was just in Iran. I've been many times, who don't like the regime, but they also don't want to be seen as capitalizing on Israel. That doesn't mean that they're natural allies of Israel or natural allies of Prime Minister Netanyahu. So just because he is calling for them to rise up doesn't mean they will, and doesn't mean that the Iranian regime won't have that domestic ability still to crack down and stop any movement. I was in Iran during the Green Revolution when people did go out onto the streets. This was after a contested election in Iran, and people went out and they were protesting, and they were quickly met with men on motorcycles, swinging clubs, tear gas, crackdowns, mass arrests. There have been two public revolutions. Both of them, the Iranian regime managed to stop. So its domestic controls, its domestic security services are quite strong, and at this stage haven't been targeted directly. They fall under the Revolutionary Guard, but it seems that they are still intact, and it has mostly been their external weapons, nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles that are being struck at this stage.
We've just gotten a statement from the IDF now telling the people of Israel, I'm going to quote from the statement here, the Homefront Command issued instructions that it is possible to leave all protected areas and continue to remain near them in all regions of the country. You are requested to continue to obey the Homefront Command's instructions, essentially telling the people there, if they are in bomb shelters, if they are in a safe spot right now, they can leave for the time being, listen for those sirens, and they can eventually come back. It looks like we can see the moon now over Tel Aviv, lighting up pretty bright there, and we can make that out after what was lighting up Tel Aviv were missiles and air defense systems lighting up the sky. You see it right here in Tel Aviv. For the time being, it sounds like, from what Israel is telling its people, that they feel it's safe to come outside, that this third wave of missiles we had heard about might have been a head fake. And there may not be more missiles being launched right now, but it is war. You never know what can happen. You have to be careful. The people of Israel are used to this. They're used to hearing sirens, and they know what to do. They've been living like this for decades, if not half a century. Richard, I do want to ask you, though, it is hard what Benjamin Netanyahu is asking of the Iranian people, right? Because not only do the people of Iran not have weapons, you mentioned the people with the clubs, the Revolutionary Guard, how they instill fear in the people of Iran, but they also just... It's tough just to get food at times. It's tough to get the basic necessities for certain Iranians. So to start a revolution, it may sound easy or it may sound encouraging, but it is incredibly hard, the reality of any type of revolution, whether it be Iran or Venezuela or anywhere else you look in the world where you have oppressive regimes.
And there might not be Iranians who want to rise up because Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is carrying out a campaign that Iranians oppose in Gaza, is asking them to rise up. So not always my enemy's enemy is my friend. We will see. There are many Iranians who don't like the regime and who are thinking about it. There are many Iranians who will recognize that their government is perhaps at its weakest stage since the 1979 revolution that brought the Islamic regime to power in Iran. So not centuries ago. We're only talking about nearly 50 years ago that Iran has been under the theocracy. And there are Iranians abroad and in the country who are seeing this moment and thinking this is the time. This is the time to take to the streets to try and change the system. But there are no clear leaders in Iran who would emerge. There is no clear leader in exile. There are a couple of possible candidates in exile, but none have any credibility on the ground in Iran. So it is not an easy thing to go from a call from an enemy state to rise up to an actual popular groundswell revolution that replaces an entrenched regime. Stranger things can happen.
Yeah.
This is a sensitive time, and I think the Israelis made it clear. Perhaps it's done for the night, but that now the ball is back in the Israeli court.
Yeah.
Are they going to really continue? Are they tomorrow morning or tonight, under the cover of darkness, continue to carry out strikes against military facilities, nuclear facilities? Are they going to start? Is Netanyahu going to now try and help the Iranian people having a popular revolution? Is he going to attack police stations? Is he going to try and black out the comms? How far is he going to go to help the Iranian people, as he just offered to do, to carry out a regime change?
Richard, stand by for us. 3:30 in the east here, 10:30 in Israel. We've just got a bit of news. President Trump has spoken with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Monica Alba's at the White House monitoring that. Monica, what can you tell our viewers?
Yeah, and this is something that we expected would likely take place today. I'm told that they had spoken in the last couple of days leading up to all of this, but given the events of this evening in Israel locally, it's of course very relevant, and we're working for more details that we can report on what the two men discussed. This White House does not usually put out what's called an official readout of what took place in a world leader call. Instead, it's typically the president himself providing his own interpretation and view of the call on his social media platform. So we're still watching and waiting to see if we can share more with you once he decides to do that. But of course, a lot of questions, Tom, that we'd be asking about what these two men discussed, again, in terms of the role potentially that the U.S. could be playing here. We know that in the past, for instance, last fall, when Iran was launching an attack against Israel, the U.S. did play a role from a defensive perspective in aiding Israel's own defensive capabilities. And that is something that has happened and perhaps could be happening again here today. So that's one of the major things that we're watching for. Again, the president doesn't have any open events on his schedule. It's possible that he could decide to come and speak before the cameras. As you know well, that can happen in a split second if he decides to do it. And it's happening on a day where, of course, tomorrow he has that major military parade and display of military muscle here in Washington, which also coincides with the birthday of the U.S. Army and his own birthday. So the president monitoring a lot of different things that are taking place. And I'm told we can expect it's likely that he has been in touch with and spoken with other leaders who would be invested in the region and throughout the world as well, who are watching this very closely, Tom. And I can also tell you that this question of what we have been talking about with specifically the idea of the U.S. assisting, we believe that we can report, according to several U.S. officials, that indeed the U.S. is helping shoot down some of these incoming projectiles. And that's notable for a couple of reasons. Again, as we were just talking about, that's something we've seen happen in the past under the Biden administration. That took place last October when we remember those back and forth attacks between Iran and Israel. And then again, that is what's happening currently as this continues to unfold. And we'll see if we can get you more information about how that's all playing out.
Yeah, Monica,
Tom.
I'm sorry. I do want to go back. That's an important piece of information, as the president was saying that, you know, they took no part in the attack from Israel on Iran. Say that one more time for our viewers. They are saying that they've assisted Israel in the counter defense, essentially blocking the missiles from hitting the population centers of Israel.
Yes, and we know that that's something that has happened in the past.
Yes.
That is not unique to this moment, so it's something we know that can be demonstrated from a military perspective. It doesn't mean that there are U.S. personnel involved. It doesn't mean that there are military assets in that way necessarily deployed. That we have asked, and our colleagues at the Pentagon can go into more detail about exactly what force posture may have been altered or changed. But I can tell you, according to U.S. officials, that they are helping in at least shooting down some of these incoming projectiles, which is key.
All right, I want to go to Jeremy Bash. He's a former chief of staff at the CIA and the Pentagon. Jeremy, I know you've been monitoring everything that's happened so far, and if you're just tuning into our special coverage here, Iran, as you see in the banner there, has launched the retaliatory strike against Israel. Iran state media saying they've launched hundreds of ballistic missiles in 2 rounds. Israel saying there were only about a dozen missiles and that they've intercepted all of them, that the images that we've seen of explosions in the air and also it looks like explosions hitting the ground as well, were all the counter defense system, the air defense system, the Iron Dome, intercepting missiles and or drones from Iran. Jeremy, as you see things playing out tonight, Iran telegraphing and essentially putting out everything they've done, and we just heard from Benjamin Netanyahu, where do you think things go from here?
Yeah, it looks like a spectacular light show, but actually that's mostly what you're seeing is Israel's air defenses lighting up over the skies of Tel Aviv, that densely populated coastal city where so many Israelis work and live. And Israel has a very strong and capable air defense system. It's pioneered the Iron Dome system, which the United States is now going to try to replicate and build for our entire continental United States. But it also has high altitude interceptors. It also has a very strong civil defense system, meaning a red siren warning system where people get apps lighting up on their phone, being told to go into bomb shelters. Everybody in Israel is trained. Even the students are trained, and every apartment building and every house has a bomb shelter. And so the civil defense, the air defense, and the counterstrike capabilities of Israel are among the most capable in the region. And the United States, I just have to say, to this issue of whether or not we're helping Israel, we are helping Israel. We help them quite a bit. We help them, give them weaponry. We help give them intelligence. We have our troops in the region. Our troops aren't just in there twiddling their thumbs. Our troops are there to project our own force and to protect our allies and our partners and our bases and our operations. And so, if I'm sitting in Iran and I'm looking at Israel, I see Israel backed by the United States and backed by Western powers. And so, this idea that we're not involved, I think, is just maybe kind of an effort to do a little good cop, bad cop by the White House. But clearly, the United States is supporting Israel in this operation and in the effort to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
And Iran announcing that they have suspended their talks with the United States over that issue right there. Where do you think those talks go from there? And can they be repaired, at least in the term of President Trump now?
Well, certainly not in the near term. And I think you're right. Like, Iran is not going to show up to talks in Oman over the next few days. But I do think that there is potentially a window for, over the medium term, over the next several weeks and months, for the Iranian leadership to say, hey, look, we're not going to be able to build a weapon without Israel finding out. Israel has very good intelligence and has developed intelligence. And so the only way for Iran to really survive and to thrive is to have a deal. To go back to something that looked like the deal the United States struck with Iran in 2015, the Joint Plan of Action, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, the so-called Obama-Iran deal. And I thought it was interesting that Trump effectively was kind of endorsing a similar deal to that deal, the one deal that he famously said was a terrible deal that he pulled out of. It's kind of the same deal he wanted. And so I suspect that we're going to head back there. The only way for Iran not to have a nuclear weapon in the future is for the United States to conduct a military operation directly. I don't think we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Or to be a deal.
Jeremy, what negotiating power does Iran have at this point, right? Iran essentially crippling their nuclear capabilities, at least from what we know. We know some of those labs and those facilities are half a mile underground, and there are some bombs that cannot get to them. But going after their chain of command as well, eliminating a lot of their leadership, not the Ayatollah. Iran has had huge economic problems up to this point. So how do they bargain from here?
To your point, they don't have a lot of leverage. I mean, the only thing they've got is the threat of just retaining their centrifuges, retaining their bomb fuel, retaining their scientists and their know-how and their weaponization programs. And that's kind of their ace card. And they want to hold on to it until the very last minute, until they get everything out of it that they can in a negotiation. But again, I don't think they've got many cards to play. Last year, they tried to fire ballistic missiles at Israel twice, in April and October. None of them hit Israel with any impact or had, really damaged anybody. I think there was one injury in those two missile attacks. And Iran's other proxies and surrogates, its client state in Syria regime collapsed. Its proxy in Hezbollah, the terrorist military in Lebanon, totally destroyed by Israel. Its proxy in Gaza, Hamas, totally destroyed by Israel. So, look, it's not that Israel has no problems. Israel has a lot of problems. Israel is surrounded by very difficult security situations. It's got the West Bank, it's got Gaza, it's got unstable borders, it's got the threat from Iran. But Iran is not holding any cards in this negotiation.
All right, Jeremy, stand by for us. Great talking to you on that point. I do want to get to Keir Simmons, who's been standing by for us as well. He's been reporting and talking to his sources throughout the region. Keir, what are you hearing from the people you talk to? You've been so involved in our reporting on the hostage negotiations between both Hamas and Israel and all the international players and Middle East countries that have been involved there. What are they saying tonight?
Well, Iran has been saying on its state media that it will not attend talks on Sunday. Oman's media saying, too, that those talks will not take place on Sunday. Those, of course, Tom, were planned and were supposed to take place with President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. And the Trump administration has been saying that it still was hoping that those talks will take place, but it does seem unlikely now as we head here in the region into Saturday, and these strikes show no sign of relenting. I will just make the point, Tom, relating to the conversation you've just been having, that one of the important points about the US supporting Israel at this moment, it may sound strange with US saying that it's not involved, and then these reports that it is in fact helping, is that if Iran was able to mount and successfully mount a substantial attack on Israel that it caused real casualties, what that would effectively do is pull the US into the conflict. It would, in a sense, very likely politically force the Trump administration to respond more substantially. And another aspect of this that is still a danger is whether Israel has the capability to, you could put it this way, take out Iran's nuclear program, because a lot of the talk prior to this attack by Israel overnight was that it was only a 30,000 pound munition that only the United States has, that is flown with on B-2 bombers, that only that kind of power, that kind of weaponry would be able to penetrate Iran's deeply buried nuclear program, particularly in some sites, and finish off Iran's nuclear program. And it wasn't even necessarily clear that the US would be able to do that even with those munitions. But there were many experts who said that that was what was needed in order to achieve this. Why is that important? And it goes to the same question of whether the US gets pulled into this, further pulled into this. Why is that important? Because of the danger that if Iran still has the capability, can reconstruct the capability to go for a nuclear weapon, if you like, then the US will feel, the Trump administration will feel forced to respond in order to ensure that doesn't happen. Because there's no question that the US, Israel, but not just those two allies, but also Arab countries around this region where I am, desperately do not want Iran to have nuclear capability. You would then have countries like Saudi Arabia saying, OK, well, we need a nuclear weapon too. These are the stakes. This is what we're talking about here in terms of the risk of escalation, the risk that the US gets pulled into this, the risk that if Israel isn't able to really effectively slow down for a substantial period, if not stop Iran's nuclear program, that it leads to more conflict, not less.
We got a bit of news here. I do want to ask you, stand by for a second. We're going to go to the White House in a moment, but the Ayatollah has just put out a message as well to the people of Iran, saying the Zionist regime will not escape safely from the heinous crime they've committed, talking about the initial strike yesterday. Keir, watching everything tonight, do you think Iran wants more warfare?
Well, it's a great question, because really Iran has been quite cautious. Looking back prior to Israel's attack on Hezbollah, for example, it built up all these proxy forces in the region. It declared its opposition to Israel, but in many ways it's been quite cautious. And what happened with that terrible attack by Hamas is that the veil was pulled back to some extent, and effectively Israel said enough is enough and launched on those proxies. And now here we are with... You hesitate to say that this is now a war between Israel and Iran. Iran is saying it is, but certainly we're at the very least on the brink of something like that. And that, honestly, is not what many in Iran wanted, not without the certainty that it would be able to win. And it never had that certainty. And now I think what we're seeing is that those in Iran who doubted that policy, who doubted whether Iran could win that war, if you like, that that battle with Israel, they may have been right.
Okay, Keir Simmons first. Keir, we thank you for that. We're going to go to Tel Aviv in a second, but I do want to get over to Monica Alba at the White House. Monica, the control room telling me you got some new reporting?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. So we were just discussing a few minutes ago this new development of the U.S. aiding in shooting down some of these Iranian projectiles that have been targeting Israel. That's according to 3 U.S. officials. And my colleagues who cover the Pentagon, Courtney Cubey, reporting now also that the Pentagon did move a number of military assets into the region in recent days. Now, again, that's something that we see time and time again when you have a situation like the one that we are witnessing. But to give you a little bit more detail, that included some Navy destroyers to be positioned off the Israeli coast to help shoot down some of these missiles, again, like we're seeing right now, and then other aerial attacks that could be expected after the Israelis launched their initial attack yesterday. So why is that notable? Again, this is a situation where the U.S. has this kind of specific technology, they have the resources, and they have the ability to mobilize them and move them quickly. And it's really important to point out here, Tom, that there are thousands and thousands of Americans who live in Israel. And so it's also a U.S. interest to protect their lives and also to protect certain military assets that the United States would have there and in the region. So that's another explanation and more detail that we're getting from U.S. officials about why that's happening. And I can also share with you that according to Downing Street, so according to the British Prime Minister, he held a conversation as well with President Trump at some point today. They are closely monitoring that as well. So I think this is really a day of behind the scenes, the president holding a lot of different calls with some world leaders, monitoring the situation, and of course overseeing the role that the U.S. is playing as these strikes continue. Tom.
Okay, Monica Alba with that new reporting. Monica, we thank you. Let's go back to Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv. And Matt, I'm being told that you're now back outside. And explain to our viewers why you're able to go outside. The IDF has sent a message. The government of Israel has sent a message to its people that they can now leave those bunkers, leave the bomb shelters they were inside of.
That's right, Tom. So we got the all clear after those sirens went off, and so now it looks as though we're allowed to leave the bunkers. We're allowed to walk around. People are, finally getting out and walking about. I'm not exactly seeing the streets flooded with people. There's going to still be a lot of lingering fear here, this is a situation that we're still hearing about Iranians launching more and more missiles. But one interesting thing that we did hear from the IDF just moments ago was that they counted 100 missiles that had been fired from Iran. Now, the Iranians said that they were firing hundreds of missiles. It looks as though there's a disparity there in terms of the numbers, where maybe some of them simply didn't make it. But it looks as though, as we were saying earlier, what we're seeing now is a glimpse of the remaining Iranian military capabilities left over by those comprehensive strikes overnight by the Israelis. So we're getting this sense now of whether or not the Iranians are going to be able to continue striking Israel, whether or not they still have much firepower left after the Israelis put so much of that under their boots in the past 24 hours. And we've just got a glimpse of that. The Iranians saying 200 missiles. The Israelis saying it was only 100. We've been hearing a lot of bellicose language from the Iranians, again, as you mentioned earlier, projecting their power, showing not just their own public that they're standing up to the Israelis, but showing the entire world and the region that they got this, that they can fight what they call the Zionist entity. And so they're going to be maybe winding up their numbers when it comes to the numbers of ballistic missiles they fired, because they know that they have been really badly damaged by those Israeli strikes. They might not have that much firepower left.
Yeah. Matt, I know Israel's been incredibly careful and cautious about releasing information while they were under attack. Rightly so. They did not want to disclose any sort of military operations or show their hand that if any missile did get through and hit a target. Are we getting any information yet about what was struck, if there was any damage? We got an initial report of only 5 people injured, and they didn't sound that serious.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we just heard from Shiva Hospital, one of the main hospitals here in Tel Aviv, that they had 9 people injured, and that's only at one hospital. So it might be more now than those 5 that I originally said for all of Tel Aviv. I wouldn't be surprised, Tom, if we heard those numbers, the casualty numbers, increase. So far, we haven't heard of any fatalities. But again, this could be ongoing. This could be continuing all night long. We're still waiting to hear about those impacts, and we haven't heard that from the IDF. We're trying to look on social media to see. But as I told you earlier, I don't think we can really, even if we did know, I don't think I could really share it with you or with our audience, because the Israelis have been asking everybody to keep that under wraps. But I think that when we start to see the full light of day here over Tel Aviv, we're going to have a very, very good sense of what was damaged and what remains standing. Right now, looking out, over this cityscape, it looks like the same thing I was looking at moments ago before I went into that bunker. So while we saw a lot of interceptions, those dramatic images that you're seeing on your screen, it doesn't look as though the damage was all that much. According to the IDF, there were no actual ballistic missile impacts. All of the sounds we were hearing, all of those explosions, they said, were interceptions.
Yeah. And this is all the information we have at this hour. I do want to bring back Jeremy Bash for a second here. Jeremy, comparing the two attacks that we've seen so far, and we talk about and think about that initial Iranian attack months ago, the drone attack, when the war in Gaza was really breaking out. I do want to ask you, have we seen sort of the full force of the Iranian military? I mean, is this all they have?
Well, I don't think they've got a lot. And again, if you look back at last year and see what they were able to field, they fielded three kinds of projectiles against Israel: ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. And the Israeli military handled the drones and the cruise missiles very well, in part by shooting them down with Israeli jet fighters, and the U.S. participated as well. And the ballistic missiles were handled by Israel's air defense system, which, again, has been built and fielded over many years with a lot of investment and a lot of American technology and know-how. So, Iran just doesn't have that many cards to play. It just doesn't have that many options here as it tries to retaliate from Israel's preemptive action, going after the nuclear sites and the nuclear scientists and the command and control inside Iran. I mean, I will say one key difference in the way these two countries are waging their wars: Israel is using intelligence-based information targeting to precisely go after specific named individuals and specific facilities. They're trying to actually put lead on a specific X to take out a missile, to take out a base, to take out a leader. Iran is firing missiles and drones into civilian areas, into civilian populations. This is a downtown cityscape on a Friday night of apartment buildings and university dorms and hospitals. And so it shows you the kind of differential approaches in war. Iran doesn't have a lot of cards to play. It's doing what it can. But again, the only thing it can do is try to fire into civilian areas. And that shows you kind of the power differential here in this conflict.
I'm looking at a headline from Reuters, Jeremy, and it says Trump's peacemaker pledge takes big hit as Israel strikes Iran. Yeah. I do want to ask you, how is this going to affect our president here, who had made some very big campaign promises, right? Peace between Russia and Ukraine, peace with Israel and Hamas, bringing the hostages back. And now you have sort of this third front, a third conflict unfolding right in the middle of his administration.
Well, look, the world just doesn't organize itself. I mean, bad guys don't just kind of back off on their own. It does require American leadership. And in the Ukraine-Russia context, I think what's happened is we haven't been able to push the parties to the peace table, and so the war goes on. In this context, maybe we want Israel to gain a little leverage over Iran. Maybe that gives us a little leverage in the negotiating table. Do a little good cop, bad cop. I think that was it wasn't very artful, but that was kind of the strategy that this White House tried to employ over the last few days. But again, if there's going to be a lasting peace in the Middle East, if there's going to be security for Israel, if there's going to be anything resembling autonomy for the Palestinians or a two-state solution or anything that we've been talking about for many years, if there's going to be an Iran that can prosper without a nuclear weapon, there's going to be peace between Israel and normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. It's going to require American leadership, American stick-to-itiveness, American fortitude. We're going to have to work with our allies and partners, sometimes lean on our allies and partners, but also stand up to the adversaries. And so the prospects for all of these things don't look very promising at this hour. But I do think if, in fact, Iran was on the precipice of getting a nuclear weapon, that would have been the worst of all possible outcomes. And I think the same way that Israel took out Iraq's nuclear program in '81, took out Syria's nuclear program in '07, the world will probably, at the end of the day, thank Israel for this. if it degraded Iran's nuclear program here in 2025.
All right, Jeremy, we thank you for that. Richard Engel, you've been watching all of this with me throughout the night as Israel came under attack. It's unclear what happens in the days ahead, but Israel, we know, will be on standby for anything.
So the Israeli military just put out that statement that Matt was quoting from, and I have it in front of me, and it said that, according to their estimate, the Israeli military's count, less than 100 ballistic missiles were fired in the two barrages combined, that nearly all of them were shot down, and that a few structures were hit, also hit by falling debris. So this does not appear to be a devastating attack by Iran by any means, based on what we're seeing, based on what Matt Bradley is seeing and hearing and smelling on the ground, and the Israeli military's own assessment. If there had been massive damage and massive casualties, the Israelis couldn't hide it. This was an extraordinary display of air defense, and that was carried out by the Israelis in collaboration, in coordination with the United States. The U.S. knew this was coming. There's no other way. The U.S., if you look back a few days ago, the U.S. pulled non-essential personnel out of the region, moved equipment in to participate in defending Israel, according to the reporting that's just coming out of the Pentagon. So the U.S. is involved in this operation, whether it was an Israeli-led operation. This was all Israeli firepower, but the U.S. clearly had foreknowledge of it and it took some actions in order to be ready to defend Israel. You couldn't just launch a defense like this on the spur of the moment. You need to put the assets in place. It's not that Israel can just turn on the system, even with its capabilities, and have the success rate that it apparently has.
Richard Engel, we thank you for your reporting. I do want to check one more time back with Matt Bradley, who's been live for us in Tel Aviv, first in a bunker, then now outside after the all-clear has been given to the people of Israel. Matt, I'm going to give you the final thoughts here. You're in a country now that has been under attack and a country that has been really at war for a while now. The people of Israel and the government there making clear that they are not done with Iran.
That's right, and we're hearing bellicose language from Iran as well. Everybody's talking about how they're going to retaliate for the retaliation, how they're going to ramp it up, how the people have crossed the line. But one thing that has become clear tonight, as Richard Engel kind of noted just a moment ago, when you see this defense in action, this comprehensive missile defense that swatted, even though it wasn't that many by the standards that we were expecting, 100 ballistic missiles out of the sky over a country as small as Israel, over a city as small as Tel Aviv, and you saw that on your screen. It really just goes to show that one of Israel's greatest offensive capabilities is its defensive capability. The fact that it's able to put up such a defense using its three-plied system, not just the Iron Dome, but also David's Sling and the Arrow missile system, all of those used in concert with each other, it allows it to make these aggressive moves like it did overnight and is continuing to do in its strikes against Iran. This is a major part of its foreign policy and of its ability to project power, because it knows and has the confidence that when another country like Iran, as powerful as Iran is, and it didn't look that powerful tonight, but it is a powerful nation with a powerful military, when you know that you can defend against such a huge incoming phalanx of missiles, then you can do things like strike out an entire nuclear enrichment program in a foreign country thousands of miles away.
And before you go, Matt, when we talk about Iran and their retaliatory strikes or their initial strikes like earlier that we saw in the year, usually it is one night, right? At least in modern history, if we judge over the last couple of years, they attack one night, they fire a bunch of missiles or drones, and then they sort of move on. Do we think this will be any different?
I would love to tell you I don't really know, but the fact is you're right. What we saw, the only other time that this has ever really happened, this big exchange of fire between Iran and Israel, was back in October. And then it was just one night of Iranian retaliation. And it was actually quite paltry, even compared to what we're seeing tonight. It was less than that. It wasn't using so much ballistic missiles. I think there were a lot more drones during that occasion. But remember, the Israelis have humiliated Iran, not just in Iran overnight, but also by destroying its proxy groups in countries throughout the Middle East, Hezbollah in Lebanon, these Syrian groups, the Syrian regime. So now we're really seeing Israel asserting its power once again and its dominance in a way that is just hard to argue with.
Matt Bradley, we thank you for all your reporting. You and your team, please stay safe there in Tel Aviv. Also want to thank Richard Engel and, of course, our Keir Simmons. That concludes this NBC News special report. We're going to have much more coverage right now with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press. We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.